Welcome to my channel, History of Ukraine Part 2. Early Modern Period. Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. After the Union of Lublin in 1569 and the formation of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Ukraine fell under Polish administration, becoming part of the Crown of the Kingdom of Poland. The period immediately following the creation of the Commonwealth saw a huge revitalisation in colonization efforts. Many new cities and villages were founded. Links between different Ukrainian regions, such as Galicia and Volyn, were greatly extended. New schools spread the ideas of the Renaissance. Polish peasants arrived in great numbers and quickly became mixed with the local population. During this time, most Ukrainian nobles became Polonized and converted to Catholicism, and while most Ruthenian-speaking peasants remained within the Eastern Orthodox Church, social tension rose. Ruthenian peasants who fled efforts to force them into serfdom came to be known as Cossacks and earned a reputation for their fierce martial spirit. Some Cossacks were enlisted by the Commonwealth as soldiers to protect the southeastern borders of Commonwealth from Tatars, or took part in campaigns abroad, like Petro Konashevich Edukny in the Battle of Khotyn 1621. Cossack units were also active in wars between the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and Tsardom of Russia. Despite the Cossacks' military usefulness, the Commonwealth, dominated by its nobility, refused to grant them any significant autonomy, instead attempting to turn most of the Cossack population into serfs. This led to an increasing number of Cossack rebellions aimed at the Commonwealth. Cossack era. The 1648 Ukrainian Kozak rebellion or Malitsky Uprising, which started an era known as the Ruin, in Polish history as the Deluge, undermined the foundations and stability of the Commonwealth. The nascent Cossack state, the Cossack Hetmanate, usually viewed as precursor of Ukraine, found itself in a three-sided military and diplomatic rivalry with the Ottoman Turks, who controlled the Tatars to the south, the Commonwealth of Poland and Lithuania, and the Tsardom of Muscovy to the east. Their Zaporozhian host, in order to leave the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, sought a treaty of protection with Russia in 1654. This agreement was known as the Treaty of Pereyaslav. Commonwealth authorities then sought compromise with the Ukrainian Cossack state by signing the Treaty of Haidai-Arch in 1658, but, after 13 years of incessant warfare, the agreement was later superseded by the 1667 Polish-Russian Treaty of Andreyusovo, which divided Ukrainian territory between the Commonwealth and Russia. Under Russia, the Cossacks initially retained official autonomy in the Hetmanate. For a time, they also maintained a semi-independent republic in Zaporozhia, and a colony on the Russian frontier in slow-border Ukraine. In 1686, the Metropolitanate of Kyiv was annexed by the Moscow Patriarchate, through the synodal letter of the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople Dionysius IV. Russian Empire and Austria-Hungary. During subsequent decades, Tsarist rule over central Ukraine gradually replaced protection. Sporadic Cossack uprisings were now aimed at the Russian authorities, but eventually petered out by the late 18th century, following the destruction of entire Cossack hosts. After the partitions of Poland in 1772, 1793 and 1795, the extreme west of Ukraine fell under the control of the Austrians, with the rest becoming a part of the Russian Empire. As a result of the Russo-Turkish Wars, the Ottoman Empire's control receded from south-central Ukraine, while the rule of Hungary over the Transcarpathian region continued. Ukrainian writers and intellectuals were inspired by the nationalistic spirit stirring other European peoples existing under other imperial governments and became determined to revive the Ukrainian linguistic and cultural traditions and re-establish a Ukrainian nation-state, a movement that became known as Ukrainophilism. Modern history. 17th and 18th century Ukraine. Ukraine emerges as the concept of a nation, and the Ukrainians as a nationality, with the Ukrainian national revival in the mid-18th century, in the wake of the Peasant Revolt of 1768-1769 and the eventual partition of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Galicia fell to the Austrian Empire, and the rest of Ukraine to the Russian Empire. while right bank Ukraine belonged to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth until late 1793, left bank Ukraine had been incorporated into Tsardom of Russia in 1667, under the Treaty of Andriusovo. In 1672, Podolia was occupied by the Turkish Ottoman Empire, while Kyiv and Braclav came under the control of Hetman Petro Doroshenko until 1681, when they were also captured by the Turks, but in 1699, the Treaty of Karlowitz returned those lands to the Commonwealth. Most of Ukraine fell to the Russian Empire under the reign of Catherine the Great. In 1793, right bank Ukraine was annexed by Russia in the Second Partition of Poland. Between 1917 and 1920, several entities that aspired to be independent Ukrainian states came into existence. This period, however, was extremely chaotic, characterized by revolution, international and civil war, and lack of strong central authority. Many factions competed for power in the area that is today's Ukraine, and not all groups desired a separate Ukrainian state. Ultimately, Ukrainian independence was short-lived, as most Ukrainian lands were incorporated into the Soviet Union and the remainder, in western Ukraine, was divided among Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Romania. Independence. On the 21st of January 1990, over 300,000 Ukrainians organized a human chain for Ukrainian independence between Kyiv and Lviv. Ukraine officially declared itself an independent country on the 24th of August 1991, when the Communist Supreme Soviet Parliament of Ukraine proclaimed that Ukraine would no longer follow the laws of USSR and only the laws of the Ukrainian SSR, de facto declaring Ukraine's independence from the Soviet Union. On the 1st of December, voters approved a referendum formalizing independence from the Soviet Union. Over 90% of Ukrainian citizens voted for independence, with majorities in every region, including 56% in Crimea. The Soviet Union formally ceased to exist on the 26th of December, when the presidents of Ukraine, Belarus and Russia, the founding members of the USSR, met in Białowieża Forest to formally dissolve the Union in accordance with the Soviet constitution. With this, Ukraine's independence was formalized de jure and recognized by the international community. On February 21, 2019, the Constitution of Ukraine was amended, with the norms on the strategic course of Ukraine for membership in the European Union and NATO being enshrined in the preamble of the Basic Law, 3 articles and transitional provisions. On the 21st of April 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky was elected president in the second round of the presidential election. Early parliamentary elections on July 21 allowed the newly formed pro-presidential Servant of the People Party to win an absolute majority of seats, for the first time in the history of independent Ukraine. On July 28, 2020, in Lublin, Lithuania, Poland and Ukraine created the Lublin Triangle Initiative, which aims to create further cooperation between the 3 historical countries of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and further Ukraine's integration and accession to the EU and NATO. On May 17, 2021, the association trio was formed by signing a joint memorandum between the foreign ministers of Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. Association trio is tripartite format for the enhanced cooperation, coordination, and dialogue between the 3 countries that have signed the association agreement with the EU, with the European Union on issues of common interest related to European integration, enhancing cooperation within the framework of the Eastern Partnership, and committing to the prospect of joining the European Union. As of 2021, Ukraine is preparing to formally apply for EU membership in 2024, in order to join the European Union in the 2030s.